Deepika. I'm one of the hosts here. So just housekeeping stuff. The toilets are between the kitchen and the reception area, through those doors and to the right. And then in the unlikely event of fire, please follow the green man and follow the people. You will be out, get out of the building. So tonight we have two amazing speakers, Deepika and Ryan going first, and then Dave going second. Before handing over to them, just a small note about our sponsors tonight. So CFD, of course, giving us the space and paying for drinks, and then of course AWS giving us pizzas and helping us in all other ways. So thanks for our sponsors, and Ryan, thank you.
Thanks, Deepika. So I think everyone enjoyed the pizzas, and thank you so much, Deepika, Susanna, and everyone from the team for setting the place up. We really appreciate that. So before I start with the presentation, let me introduce myself. I know Deepika has introduced a little bit about me. So my name is Deepika Kumar, and I'm an ISV solution architect here at AWS New Zealand. And I'm joined by Ryan today. We both work into software and digital native businesses, help them deploy and build on AWS as per the best practices. So today we will talk about a low-code approach for your software development lifecycle. So how you as a developer can save number of hours right in your IDE with an integrated experience for a faster planning, development, and the delivery lifecycle on AWS. So with that, let's have a quick preview on the agenda today. So we will look at what are the customer challenges with current offerings. Then we will have an overview of the CodeCatalyst and the benefits of the CodeCatalyst, and Ryan will take us through an awesome demo of the CodeCatalyst, how it works. So maybe before I go into that, if anyone in the room is familiar with CodeCatalyst, have you used it before? No issues. So we'll start with the basic level and give you an overview that why CodeCatalyst. So before we fine-tune into AWS CodeCatalyst, let's take a step back and see that what AWS offers in terms of development when there is an opportunity from authoring your code, then source and artifacts, deploying, build, test, and deploy, and then monitoring your application. So anyone in the room are familiar with any of these services or used them before? Nice. So when we talk about authoring the code, we offer that AWS Cloud9 IDE, and then when it comes to source artifacts like GitHub or Bitbucket, we have got AWS Code Commit and Code Artifacts in there. Then for building, testing, and deploying your code, you have got Code Build and Code Deploy. And for monitoring, there are different services like CloudWatch, X-Ray, or you can use the partner solutions in there. And on top of that, you have got Code Pipeline, which enables you for the continuous integration and the continuous delivery. So the idea was here from AWS side is that to provide you the tools which gives you the building block on these services, and which gives you the flexibility to use any of the services how you want it, and which fits into your software development lifecycle requirements. But with these things, yes, definitely you see that you have got a lot of flexibility which tool you want to use, but it comes with some of the challenges. So let's look at what of these challenges are. And so when we talk about these challenges, the first challenges is that setting up the projects is hard, and building the integration between those projects gets more complex. So if you know that AWS has got more than 200 services, and picking up the right service for the route use case, it's getting more and more complex. So I'll take a simple example here. Let's say if you are using Jira as your issue repository, GitHub as your source control, and Jenkins as your delivery pipeline. And if you want to use three tools, you have to build the custom integrations and then maintain those integrations. And in that way, you are sort of increasing your code base, which is actually impacting your developer productivity. And then the second challenge is automating the CI/CD pipelines and will set up the environments. So as a developers, I think most of you have faced the issues there. You set up the repository on your machine, set up the connections, and then sometimes you as a developer say, okay, it works for me, but doesn't work for another person in your team. That is quite a challenge with if you have to set up quite a lot of time on setting up the environment. And then on top of that, you have got complexity of the modern application. So if you look at the modern applications, they are distributed setup, and in those, and different applications are using different frameworks, different languages, which makes it even more difficult. So when we were talking to the customers, we often heard that they have got lots of struggle, like release automations, building pipelines, etc., where customer needed a bit more integrated experience. So before we go into the integrated experience, let's look at like what sort of patterns are available. So if you look at the graph line in the bottom, it says from less integrated, more overhead, it goes to the more integrated and the less overhead. So the first one is build your own. So you can actually build, you don't need to use all the tools, you can write your script. It's like a non-starter. So if you are an enterprise organization or big organization, you have got resources to do it, you can do it, but even the enterprise organizations are looking for an integrated experience. Then we have the bespoke tool chaining, which we just discussed in the example like Jira, Bitbucket, and Jenkins, where you can build your own solutions. This may or may not be integrated, but that will depend on your organizational maturity in terms of development and DevOps practices. Then you have got service suite, so either you can use a single vendor or you can just use a specific service from that vendor, like you can use Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and then Bamboo on top of that. Give me a sec. So in the service suite, it provides the integrated experience, but organization wanted a turnkey sort of solution where you can extend your services, like it integrates with external services. That's where the CodeCatalyst is quite helpful, and that's why our team decided to build onto the CodeCatalyst. So let's have a quick preview of the CodeCatalyst. So if you look into the right side of the slide, CodeCatalyst, you can think of it's a managed service, integrated platform which reduces the friction in your development lifecycle. So when we talk about code with CodeCatalyst, it's a single platform where you can host your code. It's like a source control, or you can pull your requests, merge requests, your teams can collaborate on that. And then after that, you can build, test, and deploy directly into the CodeCatalyst. You don't need an external tool to set up the integrations in there. And once you have done that, your team can collaborate on that. We will look onto that into the next slides, that how the team collaboration had made easier with the CodeCatalyst. And then you have got project management capabilities. So when I say about project management and planning, CodeCatalyst have got issue management system where you can create the issues, you can link those issues with your repositories or the pull requests, and then deploy and merge those requests in. So how does CodeCatalyst work? So as you will know that for any AWS service, you will go to the console and access those services. But for CodeCatalyst, apologies, my voice is a bit crooked today. So for CodeCatalyst, it's like a SaaS service. So you go to the codecatalyst.aws. The service is not available into the console. You will set up your builder ID as you will do and normally sign up onto the SaaS platform. Once you set up the builder ID, you can, there are different pricing tier available. So in a free tier, you get the 2000 build minutes and few dev environments hours. But if you have got requirement more than that, you can easily upgrade to the standard tier, and you can find that pricing information on the side. But that's not the focus for the presentation today. So how the projects work. So with CodeCatalyst, another benefit here is that you can spin up the projects within few minutes of the click. So we have got more than 15 blueprints available. So when I talk about blueprint, it can be a single page application, it can be a 3-tier web application, your data and analytics needs, or your intelligent document processing blueprints are available in there. With the demo today, we will be using a modern 3-tier web application architecture. But let's say if you are running a single page application, it gives you flexibility to select the framework. Like if you are running into Angular, Vue, or React, you can select that which framework you want. Or if you are using the CDK, it gives you the flexibility that you want to use Python or the TypeScript. And in the compute options, there are different sort of compute options are available. And then setting up the dev environments, it's just a one-click button, but we will show it into the demo. So that's around CodeCatalyst. Let's have a bit of detailed view of the CodeCatalyst space layout looks. So once you set up your builder ID and then when you create that space, you need to affiliate that space with an AWS account for the billing purposes. So which account will be billed for your projects and the deployment pipelines. And once you set it up, you can set up multiple projects in that space. So think of space as a, maybe it's your organizational unit, or it can be a different department in your organization. So let's say if you have a marketing, finance, or engineering department, you can either set up a different space or you can create a project specifically inside that. Based on your how you want to isolate these environments with each other and set up the roles and permissions in there. And once you set up the project, you can set up multiple repositories in the project. You can create multiple environments. So let's say you want to create 2 or 3 dev environments for different teams, that you can do so. You can have multiple compute fleets and many workflows in the CodeCatalyst project. So that is around the project, and we will talk about the projects into the demo, that how you set it up, how you set up the environments and the members in that space. So that is on very high level. So let's have a bit of functional overview of the CodeCatalyst. So I'm using a simple example here. Once I set up my builder ID, I have created a space here, which is a CodeCatalyst space, and then I have affiliated that space with 3 accounts. So AWS account 1, AWS account 2, and the 3, they are available to that space. But for this space, I'm using AWS account 1 as a billing account. So I will set up the billing role in there, and that will be affiliated. Now the AWS account 2 and 3 are available to that space. When you set up the new environment, it will ask you that in which account you would like to deploy that environment. And that's where account you select, like your dev account or your prod account, you will select that account and the deployment will take place in that account. So when you create that dev environment, you have to create the roles and set the permissions. As you know that we have got quite strict rule on security, so you set up the roles and permission. That role will be assumed by CodeCatalyst action to access the resources into the AWS account 2 or 3, however you want it. So that's a bit of functional overview of CodeCatalyst. Let's look at some of the benefits. I won't go into the detail. I have got individual side of the benefit. So accelerated project setup, it helps you with that. It helps you to automate the daily workflows, which is the key highlight of CodeCatalyst. Then how you can automate the environments and your teams can collaborate on their projects. So let's look at how you can set up the project, how you can accelerate the project setup. So as I mentioned, in minutes in just few clicks, you can set up the project. You can select from the library of the blueprints. And these blueprints are created using the well-architected framework in terms of security, performance, reliability, etc. And if you are using GitHub or Jira already, you can extend these CodeCatalyst space to use your GitHub repository or your Jira issue tracking system. Or if you are having your existing projects, either you can import the code to the CodeCatalyst or link those repositories if you are using GitHub. So these are few extensions are available, but our team is working on adding more extensions to the CodeCatalyst. Now another benefit of CodeCatalyst is the daily workflow. So it automates all the workflows. You have got 2 options in there. You can set up the workflow visually, or you can do it programmatically via YAML file, or both. So it depends on your team's skill set. And with that workflow, when I say that CodeCatalyst action is there, and then you can also use the GitHub actions if your team is familiar with the GitHub actions. And once it's done, you have got an options for managed compute. So if you are on free tier, definitely you get a bit of limitations on the compute type, but if you upgrade to the standard tier, you get more options on the compute type in there. And in terms of streamlining the testing and reporting, it gives you the reporting like what is your code coverage looks like. You get all the reports and the dashboards are in there. So it's like a one-place tool where you have got all these setups already there. Automating environments. So for automating the environments, it's quite simple. It integrates with number of IDEs like Cloud9, Visual Studio Code. You can see it into the screenshot here. So once you set up the environment here, if you see into this screenshot, I have set up the 3 environments. So setting up these 3 environments help you context switching between these environments quite easily. And your developers, as I mentioned, your developers don't need to set up these repositories locally on their machines, set up the connections, which Ryan will show you in the demo. And the last, but not the least, is that your team can fluidly collaborate on the code, like they can create the pull request, merge request, add the approver, etc. But the main advantage here is that when your team is working on CodeCatalyst, they don't need to have the AWS account. So as a team member, like Ryan is working on a project, he sent me an invite for CodeCatalyst, and I set up my account, builder ID, and I have got access to the project. And this is quite an important feature because when we were working with the customer, as a developer, if you are using code pipeline or code deploy of those services, you needed to have an AWS account. And sometimes the data will reside in those accounts where the organization did not want it to have access to that data to the developers. But with CodeCatalyst, no access to AWS accounts, still your developers can access all these dev tools directly into that. Yeah, and the other benefit of that, you can, if you are using GitHub Actions, the way you set up the automated notifications, you can send it to Slack or your email. And you can set up it has got already built-in Kanban board for issue tracking and how that issue is, what are the activities are happening on that project. So in a nutshell, if you look at CodeCatalyst, it's an integrated tool which helps you to host your source repository, help you with issue tracking, helping with the automation, setting up the workflows, and setting up the dev and the prod environments directly from one place. That's pretty much around me. I'll hand over to Ryan for the demo.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, so we'll move to the demo now. So thanks, Deepika, for that awesome presentation. So Deepika has kindly covered all the theoretical aspects, but I think it's probably a lot better if we actually look at it from a practical perspective as well. I just realized, with the problem with live demos is things will go wrong, and it has already gone wrong. My Wi-Fi is not connected. So just give me 1 second. I'm just going to quickly connect that.
You want to connect it to your color, the mic?
Cool. There we go. So essentially, what I've got here is the CodeCatalyst landing page. It's very, very simple to use. And in terms of the sign-up pages, it's pretty simple as well. It follows the same sign-up page and everything. There we go. Nope, it's not working. I think it's connected on my there we go. All good. Got it. Thank you. Yeah, so it's quite simple to get started, to be honest. You just sign up here. It follows the same sign-up process. You put your email account into CodeCatalyst. It sends you a one-time verification code, and off you go. I'm not going to do the whole sign-up process here, but just to go back to what Deepika was saying, the AWS Builder ID itself is separated from the AWS account. Cool. So I've created my account. I'm logging into CodeCatalyst. This is what I'm going to see. This is the dashboard that comes with it. So here's my projects. I've got 2 here. One for the AWS user group that I've configured beforehand, and a test grid project. But before we go into the project itself, I want to quickly cover spaces. So the way you should think about spaces is the same as GitHub repositories. It's basically where you're going to host your code for your company, your department, your team, depending on what you need it for. You need an AWS account. I've got one here, and basically just copy that, and it should be able to propagate and build up all those resources in that AWS account. Cool. I'm not going to create a space because it's going to take some time. What I'm going to do instead is go into the application that I've previously built and deployed. Before that, I'm going to create a project. So as Deepika was saying, we have more than 15 blueprints available, 16 in fact today. What I want to specifically call out here is if you're a new developer, like when I was starting to code like 2-3 years ago, and I had no idea about how to set up all these configurations and stuff, we actually have that single page application all ready for you to go. So if you are starting out as a React developer, as an Angular, as a Vue developer, we have a variety, these 3 variety frameworks that you can go and provision a blueprint which will create that for you. In this specific case, the architecture here is going to deploy a CloudFront service, and it's going to store the static files in S3. So for the demo tonight, what we're going to do is deploy a modern 3-tier web application. It's a website that has a bunch of mythical misfits that you can go and adopt, and basically this is the architecture itself. We have a presentation layer, so the CloudFront and S3 bucket where it's storing all the static files, an application layer which is hosted on Lambda, but you can also change that to EC2 if you wanted to, and a DynamoDB backend. So I'm just going to quickly run in and create this environment here. Put in my account that I'm going to deploy on, and select the CodeCatalyst role that I have pre-configured, select the region, give it a name, and I'm going to go and create my project. Cool. So what it's doing at the moment is just provisioning some resources, and there we go. There's our project up and ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to workflows first. And the great thing about this is when you deploy this application, it's already going to have a CDK deploy. So it's already going ahead and deploying the entire workflow for you. So you don't have to worry about writing CDK scripts to run and deploy the environment. It's all starting to do it for you. So if I just zoom out a little bit, you can see on the bottom here, there's a workflow. So what this is saying is if there is a push to the repository, it's going to kick off that build. It's going to run CDK Bootstrap, which is going to create that AWS resource and deploy that in my account. Build the backend on Lambda, deploy the backend, run some tests on it, but at the same time build and run the front end, and then deploy the front end. So that's all pre-configured for you already. There's no need to, I guess, create another project and then write a couple of YAML scripts to build that entire project from scratch. That's the beauty of a blueprint. And it's the same thing with that single page application. You have that React project where if you type npm start, it has that localhost 3000. That's all deployed on AWS service with CloudFront, so you can go off and build your own personal projects. Very good for students, because if you need to show employers that you're actually a developer and you're not just making stuff up on your CV, you can do that very easily. Cool. So this is the YAML file. So we have the triggers here that says every time I make a commit push to main, these are the sequence of actions that it's going to follow. Bootstrap, build the stuff on Lambda, build the backend. What if you're not a person that likes to look at all these codes like line by line? Well, we also have the visual aspect to it. And just to showcase that it's actually changing the YAML itself, what I'm going to do here is go in and I'm going to rename this from deploy front end to say deploy front end to development. And what that's going to change is if I go to YAML, it's going to rename that for me and do all of that. So very standard like visual to YAML conversion there. Cool, so that's what's happened, when you create a new project with blueprints. I'm not going to go and do a bunch of stuff there because that's going to take like 30 minutes just to provision the EC2 and the Lambdas. So what I've done beforehand is run my own pipelines just so that we can get this conversation going a little bit faster. So here I have a run, exactly the same thing, but it's all provisioned already, all that service is up. So when I was talking about how the app is already deployed, it's already deployed. If you can like copy and paste that really quickly, you can see that it's already been deployed with CloudFront, .NET, and it's all ready to go. It's a bit weird, but there's actually some text there. But I just want to call out that it's all been deployed and everything. Cool. So obviously as a developer, we have this thing called DevOps these days, where you write your code, but you're also responsible for operating that, right? So you want to know if your code is properly tested and if it's doing the thing that you're expecting it to do. So I won't go into testing, but what I want to call out with Amazon CodeCatalyst specifically is that we have this thing with coverage tests, where it tells you how many lines of code is covered, and it gives you like sort of like this single plain view of what's being covered, what's not covered. It also gives you like a recommended like threshold, so above 70% is what we recommend for line code coverage. But it also shows like how much of the branching has been covered as well. Cool. So that's all deployed on my account. Now the good thing about doing it on CodeCatalyst as well is it runs that whole CloudFormation stack on my AWS account. So if I go to CloudFormation on the account that I've given it, I can see that all of these stacks have been developed, has been deployed and built and created. And that's going to give me all of the endpoints that I'm also using to deploy that same service. Cool. So that's really, really good if you're a lone wolf developer. You can control everything in one specific space, right? But as we know in software development, programming is done in teams. So what we have here is also a Jira board, an issue page. And you can also add others to the account. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an issue. I'm going to say edit misfits. Misfits on the page. Give it an assignee. In this case, I'm going to assign it to myself, but I've previously added Deepika to the environment, and Deepika will immediately get an email, which is your standard like Jira board stuff, and then I'm going to create that issue. Now, the cool thing about this CodeCatalyst platform is with regards to the dev environments that Deepika was talking about. So remember when Deepika was talking about that you don't have to have all the code in your local computer and environment? I'm going to showcase that to you next, which is you can create your own dev environment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use Visual Studio Code because I'm very familiar with that platform. I'm going to clone the same repository, use the same, work on the same branch that I'm working, and I'm going to click Create. So in this case, I'm going to create it on main, and that's going to go ahead and create that. So the site is going to ask me to open that link. It's going to open Visual Studio Code. It's going to do some configurations. And in a minute, you'll see that I'm going to get all my code files and everything on my environment. So close that. I'm just going to run for a bit. So what's happening in the background is Visual Studio Code is opening up the dev environment in another Visual Studio Code, but it's doing all of the configurations with Git, logins and passwords and everything. Cool. So as I mentioned before, it's opened up another Visual Studio Code, so you can see the one in the background was the one that was used to configure that. I'm going to trust the author because I'm the one that created the environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and make some code changes. So I have previously named myself as one of the misfits, but I'm going to change that to now to Deepika. And I'm going to go ahead and push some code. So if I open up my terminal, this is like very standard like coding stuff. and then we're going to git push it. So you will have seen that I was able to do all of this, and I haven't actually gone in and configured any of my Git credentials. And that's because CodeCatalyst has already done that for me. So every time your developers are getting a new computer, or if their computer has broken down and has all that code, they have to go in and reconfigure all of that Git credentials, right? But in this specific case, CodeCatalyst has done that for me, and I don't have to do any of the Git configurations. So if we go back to the repository now, and I go to my pull request, and I create it, I can see, actually it won't be a pull request because I merged it into main. But what's going to happen now is it's going to kick off another workflow. And that's also, the usual like CI/CD pipeline. So as you can see, because I pushed it into main, it's going to kick off a run. So that pretty much covers everything. One last thing I want to cover here is what Deepika was talking about with regards to being able to add the GitHub actions to your workflow. So we're going to go to workflow here, click on visual, click on actions, and here we can see I can change to GitHub. So if I'm already using GitHub actions, I don't need to change it all into CodeCatalyst and do a bunch of new CDK write-up. I can just add my GitHub actions here, and it'll kick off that process and start your deployments on CodeCatalyst. Cool. That's basically everything I have in terms of the presentation. So I'm going to move back to the presentation here. And yeah, just a quick wrap up from us. Thank you so much for sitting and listening to us give a presentation about CodeCatalyst. There's a QR code here. So with AWS, we're a very data-driven company. So if you can, please scan the QR code and give us some feedback, and we'll take those feedback and improve on our presentation, which will hopefully give us better presentation in the future as well. But it should only take like a minute. Just scan the QR code, a couple of smiley faces hopefully, and then there we go. That's it.
Thanks,
Cool, yeah. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
So instead of using GitHub, can you use something like Bitbucket or other repository? Or is that?
At the moment, these are the extensions which are added by our service team, but we take these feature requests and pass it on to the service team. In future, they will be.
Also, you said you looked at the CloudFormation template. Sorry, you looked at the CloudFormation console to find the link to your website once it was built.
Yeah.
Is that the only place you can find it, or can you find it right into the code?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually, if I go down all the way here, it should also have the link there as well.
Yeah.
Both of the places in the CodeCatalyst as well as your AWS console, you can find it. So the idea is just to have one place, not.
But to me as a user, it wouldn't make sense that I would have to go into CloudFormation to find the link, right?
No, it's here.
Yeah.
Right?
So I just want to call out here. So there's a view app here. So if I click that button, it's going to bring me to this. But also, if you don't like that, there's also another one where it's like variables, and if you scroll down here, there's an endpoint URL that you can click into as well.
Even better, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew there was one, but I just wanted to confirm that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Assuming it's just that.
Yeah.
And is it possible to build custom blueprints within for consumption within your own organisation?
Yeah, that's absolutely. So these are just the blueprints, but you can create your own blueprints, your own projects from the scratch, and there. For publishing those blueprints, I'm not 100% sure, so I'll check on that and we'll come back to you.
But that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
We should probably
Yeah.
talk to the service team about it.
Yeah.
No, thank you for the suggestion. We'll take that back, and then we'll make sure to let the service team know as well.
What is the reason that it's like not linked to AWS and it's a way to connect it to a identity provider, so like a company provider or something like that, so instead of having the password.
You mean by when setting up the builder ID, you link it with your IDP?
No, what I mean is why is not part of the using the AWS accounts to log into this tool or having this tool in AWS? And the other thing is, it is not the case, but can connect it to another identity provider, so another EIM or something like that one. So instead of
So the first reason of that it's not into AWS console because some of our customers, they wanted it as a SaaS service. Another part is that if the developers have access to the account and the database is hosted in the same account, and if there is a PII or confidential data, that's what they want to keep the developers away from that. So it's just a single piece. That's where it's a software as a service platform. You will just think of it.
Just to pull on that thread as well, I think we also operate on the principle of least privilege, so only give the right amount of access to the right tools, right? So obviously if you're a contractor outside, you don't want them to have access into your AWS account just to develop. So having that separation isolates that from happening, or prevents that from happening.
Yeah, just on that, how would you move data between environments? Move data, say you're wanting to copy a production database to a development environment. Can you do that through the interface?
That won't be the capability. I am thinking that if you write a custom workflow on that, write your own script, that's the other way. But for moving the data from between those environments, I think as a customer, it will be your responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
But just curious, why would you need to copy the data from dev to prod or vice versa?
More likely prod to dev. Basically, you're doing development against the latest production version of the database.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. But the whole idea of copying your prod data to dev is kind of like what we call a break glass approach. So ideally, you shouldn't want to do that just to test. You would have your mock data, right? Just fake data. Because if you're a health company, you're kind of reaching a little bit of the HIPAA laws, but there's also other use cases. But yeah, maybe we can have a chat about that and understand that a little bit more.
Sure.
Yeah.
In this CodeCatalyst, do they have a solution for the code quality check?
For
code quality check, like Sonar 2 or something?
So that's where your workflows will come into the picture. So you will set up the workflows if you are using Sonar Cube as your DevSecOps pipeline and different pipelines. So that will you add it into your workflows, and that will call that service and use those quality checks in there.
Okay. So if I'm already using some, say, Atlassian suite, Jira or Bucket or something,
Yeah.
will I be able to integrate as well?
Yeah, so currently there is an extension for Jira, so all you need to go through to the project settings and extension, so you can use the Jira, but for Bitbucket it's not there yet. Our team, I have to look into that, what is on our roadmap, but we are hoping that Bitbucket will be in there with the extension soon. At the moment it allows the GitHub, but it doesn't stop you, as I mentioned, that you can import the code from your repository if you already have on Bitbucket, so that's how you can work it in there.
As you have you've got environments built with infrastructure as code, so it seems like you have some Terraform built in, right, and already. Can you use that to spin up a separate environment within CodeCatalyst?
If you have got pre-built Terraform and those environments.
Yeah, so you have your AWS account.
Yeah.
It has all the infrastructure built with Terraform, let's say.
Yeah.
But then can you utilize it so that you create a new space inside of CodeCatalyst with whatever infrastructure as code you have?
I think from the way I understand, I have to look deep dive into that. But if you will go to the YAML sort of that, if your infrastructure code is in YAML, I think you can bring that code in. That's my understanding, but I'll check on that and we'll do that.
Thank you.
So, sorry for that. We have a tight schedule today. However, we always have time to do some networking after the presentations. And I'm sure Ryan and Deepika will be very, very happy to answer your questions. We will have a 5 minutes break, so you can grab more beer, go to the toilet. It's just the time that our special guest from Australia, Dave, will set up the environment and then start the meetup. And thank you so much, Deepika. Thank you so much. So 5 minutes, team.
Just a quick thing for my presentation. Scan to check it. There's no event bridge